Hello, let's balance the scales of justice. Hello, welcome to the HolmFront. I am Tyler, your host, and to my right, as always, is Mitch, my overly artistic friend. Mitch, thank you for joining me. So we, over the Oscar season, we did all the Oscar films. Well, not all.
Yeah,
we did the
technically not.
relevant ones. Let's call it that. But there was one that got snubbed.
Yeah, that we had flagged as, oh, we should see that. That sounds really good. And no nominations.
You described this to me in reference to another film, correct?
Yeah,
Do you remember
so
what one that was?
oh, like when I first recommended
Yeah,
it?
there was another film that brought this one up, and this one sounded a lot more compelling than that one did. I can't remember the comparison. Whatever. So this
Yeah, I
is
don't
this
remember.
is a Clint Eastwood film that came out last year, obviously. And
Did you feel like it was snubbed? I guess Amelia Perez was nominated, so yeah, it was snubbed.
yeah, absolutely. Everything was snubbed at that point, though. That's a terrible standard.
Well, no, Craven the Hunter wasn't snubbed.
It's been,
I mean, it was snubbed.
I don't know what's worse. So
Deservedly so.
we'll go over this, but I think at least in the screenplay, this was snubbed because this was a really good screenplay.
Yeah.
Because I remember you describing just the premise to me, and I was like, man, that sounds really compelling.
Mm-hmm.
And it held up even after watching it. So the compelling premise didn't disappoint. So this is like I said, Clint Eastwood film. If you've seen any of his other films, he's a pretty good filmmaker. I wouldn't say he's the best music composer, which he does most of his own music for films.
But he didn't do the music here.
He didn't do the music, so the music's pretty good, actually. Not to disparage Mr. Eastwood. So we're gonna start opposite today because we liked a lot more than we disliked. So I figured, why don't we just start with what we dislike since it's such a shorter list?
That's fair.
What did we dislike?
Oh, wait a minute. Do you want me to do a quick summary?
Sure.
I will just tell you the premise that I told him before what I had looked up.
We'll do that spoiler free, and then the rest of this will just be spoilers.
Yeah. Although I don't think. I mean, you find out within like 10 minutes the premise.
Yeah.
Pretty much exactly. So basically, what happened was, this character is put on a jury, and then as the details of the case become revealed to him, he starts to suspect that he's the person who actually committed the murder by accident. That's essentially and so he's now a juror for someone who he now feels strongly that they didn't do it and it was him, in fact.
Right.
Yeah. So that is
fascinating premise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so what did we dislike?
Okay, so it has a little bit of a rough start. Clint Eastwood, in a lot of cases with his movies, he's very content to just be like, well, this is what's happening in the story. And there's not a lot of,
doesn't ease you in very much.
Yeah, he doesn't have, but I mean, there's something nice about it because he's not very theatrical, so he's very grounded. For example, I saw the film Last Breath not too long ago, which I don't know, there's not really a whole lot to say about it. It was good. It was fine. But one thing I did not like about that movie is when it starts, it just has this super dramatic music as he's just like walking to his job. And it's like the suite for the whole like story. And I'm like, look, I haven't had a chance to experience this inspirational story you're trying to tell me. So just stop with the music. It was way too much. Gotcha. That's how I felt with that one. So this movie did the opposite of that. And it's like, it's so un-Hollywoodized that it's just like, character wakes up. They make breakfast. They have a conversation. Character goes to the courthouse. And it's just really, really mundane stuff until the details of the case become revealed. And with that, the editing, I didn't really like. There was so many cuts. It was just like, well, now we have this angle. Now we have that angle. And it's like, I didn't need both.
It tones it down in the film. But the beginning especially it's pretty janky.
Yeah, it's got a very janky, opening 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there, but...
Maybe they just had too much material they had to sort through. So like, I don't know what to do here, so we're just gonna have to cut it up to make this more salvageable and short.
Yeah, possibly, because there was like one shot where you see the prosecutor and the defense attorney,
Yeah.
and they're like, it's like from above, and they're walking up this staircase, and I liked that shot well enough. But then, like when they got up to the door, he has to like cut to like show them closer up. I was like, why did you do that? Just like have the camera just get in closer, and then it'll be like there are two faces on the side of the screen. It'll be a 2-shot, and then they walk in. I was like, you didn't need a cut there. And I know that seems
And
like
it
a
cut
small
like 4
thing.
times in there too.
That's why
'Cause
it
it
becomes an issue, because you're
cut-
like, how many times do I need to do this?
Yeah, it cut from that to like behind both of them, and then the over the shoulder back and forth, and then it does this random shot where it jumps back and it shows the door closing behind them, and I was like, why did I know they went in the door? Why did we? I know what happens to a door after you go inside of it, so why did you? Whoa! It was just weird. It was like, I don't see why this is necessary at all. But yeah, so the editing was a little bit janky. And then throughout the film, the cinematography is subpar. It's
I don't know
very
what to make of
strange.
it.
Yeah, I can't tell if it's good or not. But if I have my attention drawn to it so much, I'm gonna count that as a point against it at least.
Okay. I felt like I liked most of the look of this movie. I liked the interior shots and the courthouse.
Yeah.
But I'm also a sucker for light coming through blinds. I have a weird obsession with that. So if there's just light pouring in through blinds, I'm like,
That natural look that it's got.
yeah, it just is very comforting. I don't know. I think it makes things interesting too. I mean, in this movie you could argue it has to do with like it's kind of like jail lines, like in a prison cell, and that was partly what they were trying to do with that. So you could maybe argue that. I think it just looks good, especially for like sci-fi cyberpunk movie stuff, like Blade Runner does some of that. But then there's like shots in like people's homes or like just exterior shots that just look like someone pulled out their phone. And it's fine because it's natural lighting, but it also is just like,
Different quality kind of look to it.
yeah, it's almost like the atmosphere kind of shifts
Hmm.
in a way where, again, it goes back to the film just kind of doesn't really care. It's just like, well, the story is the important part. I'm like, yeah, that's true, but I mean, you are a visual medium,
Right.
so, you know, the visuals
more
do
to do.
matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the story front, they do deliver. So I mean, whatever shortcomings this thing has, it makes up for it.
Did you like anything about the cinematography, or you mostly just didn't like it?
No, I think the fact that my attention was so drawn to whether I did or didn't like it is what I dislike. Because I'm like, I'd rather just be immersed in the film, especially if it's story based.
Uh-huh.
And so the fact that I'm distracted trying to figure out if I like the cinematography is the point against it. Yeah, I mean, otherwise, most the stuff within the courthouse is all fine. The stuff in where the jury, the deliberation scenes are all fine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it doesn't really add or subtract, just kind of
Is.
it's just there. It's just like this was necessary to make this a movie, so it's here, which is a weird. Like, it was just bizarre. The fact that I'm saying that about cinematography in a film is, I don't know. It's just a weird point.
It is a weird point. I
So,
also
I
feel
don't know.
like, in terms of like Clint Eastwood, he's been around a long time. He's made lots of movies, some of which are very good. This felt like I could have been like, if I didn't know it was Clint Eastwood, I could have been mistaken for thinking this was someone's like first movie.
Yeah, that's fair.
Doesn't it
Could've
have
been
that
like
vibe where it's just
bit.
like it's
almost like an independent film,
yeah,
kind of.
very just
Whatever.
not bad, nothing bad, but just weird.
I
We
love how
probably-
long we've gone on this point. So let's just move on. Whatever. So those are the only things we kind of.
Yeah, there's something else, but we'll get into that when we get to talk about the characters later. So, yeah, let's talk about what we did like. So, what did you like?
Casting for sure was great.
Yeah.
Nicholas Hoult did a great job. I could tell he's hiding an accent for sure, but I mean maybe that's just me and
Because he's British, is that why?
I think he's English, but whatever,
English,
whatever the
okay.
difference is. But yeah, he played in Nosferatu, and I think he uses his real accent there. So if you're curious what he sounds like, so yeah,
Well,
casting.
he's supposed to be, because they live in Georgia. That's where the story's set, and he's the only person who doesn't have like even a slightest hint of a southern accent. Because there were other characters who did,
Yeah, real thick.
but I guess there
Yeah.
were some who didn't. So I guess transplants or whatever.
From what I understand, Georgia is a bit of a mix. because
Okay.
I mean, you've got the Florida runoffs. They don't have much of an accent, but then you have the Southern people that have more of that drawl
Oh, okay.
that comes with it. Whatever. I mean, Georgia accents are also super attractive. What did you like?
Is that an invitation you're just throwing out there for someone from Georgia?
Maybe.
Just leave a comment. Be like, I'm from Georgia.
Hey, I'll throw my email in there. Whatever. Yeah. So, what did you like?
Yeah, I like the screenplay quite a bit. I feel like, I mean, that's so, regardless of the weirdness with the direction or the editing and the cinematography, all other things aside, screenplay was good. You're here for the story, and the premise, I think, makes it clear that you are here for the story, and the story does deliver.
Yes.
I actually saw a lot of parallels with this movie and 12 Angry Men, which is, a classic where you have 12 jurors who are very angry. And they're very men.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah,
I was wondering what it was about at first, and now I know.
Yeah, it's about men that are angry, and there's 12 of them.
Oh. Wow.
Okay, so if you've seen 12 Angry Men, you want to watch this movie. I'll just say that right now. Assuming you liked 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, if you liked 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, if you hated 12 Angry Men, you'll
Go
probably
watch
hate this because they're very similar. In fact, there was a scene in this where it was almost like 5 lines of dialogue in a row by multiple characters, all of which was like you could probably match it up exactly like these are the exact same things that were said in 12 Angry Men because they just applied. Like they applied to almost every court trial. So I didn't see it as a bad thing. It wasn't like it hurt it. If anything, it felt good because it was that, and it was a little bit of a mix of a film called Caliber, which I think is a Netflix movie. That one's less well known, but it's pretty highly rated. I saw it. It's very dark. Caliber is a super dark movie. It's this like horrific accident that happens, but it does play. It's similar to this movie because the end of that movie. And I don't think this is really spoiling anything, but like one of the characters is just like their life is basically ruined, even though they get it back. And so there's kind of this like tension of like, in this movie, this movie isn't quite like that, but it does like reintroduce that subject matter of like aftermath kind of ideas, after what happens, based on like who knows what.
Gotcha. Okay.
So anyways, so yeah, those are interesting comparison movies if you're curious. But yeah, if you don't watch a lot of these kinds of movies, then this is, I would say, a pretty good starting place. I think it introduces a really great moral conundrum that we're going to talk about in a moment. The last point, you want to take it away? The other thing that you liked?
Sure. Is the music.
Yeah.
Music's great.
Yeah, music's
it was not Clint Eastwood, so.
It was great because it was not Clint Eastwood, or it was great because it was great?
Well, both. Yeah.
Okay. It was kind of Thomas Newman-like.
Yeah, it started that way, and then it has... Yeah, I forget the guy's name, but it was good. It was. I thought it was going to be a very Clint Eastwood style, so maybe that was why my expectations were exceeded. So
he actually doesn't have a lot of music in it. I could have done with a little more, honestly.
That's fair.
But I also didn't really need it, so yeah.
Yeah, it did well on its own. Okay, so the best part of the film, the moral conundrum. So this film did a great job of layering this conundrum into sympathetic ways, but also ways that it's like you don't really have a clear answer or a right thing. You get a lot of questions about what justice looks like in a complex situation that deals with a bunch of flawed humans.
Mm-hmm.
And it does that expertly. So the tension rises slowly as it builds, and it does, and does a great job. And so I was hooked through the whole thing because it kept adding these layers on and made it a lot more unclear as to what to do with all this information. So whoever did the screenplay, good job on
Actually, do you
that.
want to pull up the screenplay? I'm kind of curious, or who wrote it?
Sure.
Yeah.
When you take it away while I do that.
So some of the things we're going to be talking about will be spoiler territory, but we'll do our best to keep it light so that way you can go and experience the film for yourself. So one layer that I think is particularly interesting is that the main character has a history of being an alcoholic. And so that was a struggle of his, but he's moved past that. And, he was present at the night. It's like there's like this bar and there's like a confrontation. And then afterwards is when someone dies. and he was at the bar and kind of oversaw the confrontation, just like, in the background or whatever. But he was just there dealing with his own problems. And they don't make it clear right away if he was actually drinking that night or not. It seems like he is at first.
Well, you also
and then
don't
you
know
get
that he is an alcoholic. What you do
Yeah.
know is that he has a pregnant wife, he has a job, and that he's trying to get out of this trial. So he goes in, tries to give his reason that it's a high risk pregnancy, he needs to be available. But the judge keeps him on anyway. So he's in this trial. As they begin to deliberate the story, he realizes that he was there that night because he doesn't know
Yeah.
that at first. So they ask, do you have any bias against this trial or that would, interfere with your decision making? And he says no, and then finds out, oh, I was there, but I wasn't really paying attention, so maybe this doesn't matter. And then as it goes on, he begins to realize, like, oh, I might have been involved a lot more than I thought I was.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, there's a fight that ensues between a couple. The female storms off into the rain, in the dark night, and the boyfriend is assumed to have killed her afterwards.
Yeah.
Um,
That he hunted her down with his car and then
right.
Viciously murdered her.
Yeah,
And there's an eyewitness who thinks they saw it, but it's pitch dark. It's raining.
So
What
the
did you see,
claim is that he beat her with a blunt object and threw her off the bridge.
Yeah.
So as that's being said, Nicholas Hoult goes into this memory of driving, and they film it in a way that makes it seem like he was drunk.
Mhm.
They explain later what it actually is, but it makes it look like he's inebriated. He's not thinking clearly as he's driving. He reaches for his phone and runs over something and sees a sign that says deer crossing. So he assumes that the deer, his bumper's a little messed up, but he can't see anything over the bridge. So he looks down and he doesn't see anything. He just assumes he hits a deer.
It's pitch dark. It's rainy.
So he just moves on.
Yeah.
But in this trial, he realizes, well, I might be the one that's actually guilty, and this man is standing trial for murdering his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And he sees the pictures of this woman and what happened to her. And he's like, well, what do I do here? Because I have a wife at home that is a high-risk pregnancy. I didn't actually mean to kill this person. I thought it was a deer, so it's not like I actually did a hit and run. He got out and looked afterwards.
And to be clear, it heavily suspects that it could be him. It seems like it probably was, but
it never confirms it.
It never does definitively confirm that it was him, because he didn't see for a fact to know that he hit her.
Right.
And so it could have been someone just before him or just after.
Yep.
Who happened to also just assume that it was a deer or something like that. And then he really did hit a deer that also fell down or whatever. Or it's like you don't
really
get to know. Yeah.
But I think that's the point of the film, is that when you're faced with this conundrum where there are no clear answers, for one, do we hold anyone accountable for that? But for two, if there is someone to be held accountable, what does that look like? What do? Do you just imprison someone like that? Because he wasn't out there to kill someone, and now he's got a situation where he has a wife and a child to take care of. Potentially, he has a pregnant wife at least. And so at that point, it's like, well, do you put him away? Or is he someone that needs to be held accountable like that?
When he's not a
right.
bad person or anything. And the other thing is, see, he tries to talk with someone, he confides in someone that he trusts, and he explains them. He's like, well, can't I just, tell them the truth? If I come clean now, it was an accident, I'm not even sure it was me, but it doesn't, would it make sense? And then he's like, well, where were you? And he was like, well, I was at the bar. That's how I knew that, that it was connected to it. And he's
he's saying this to his AA counselor, who happens
Yeah.
to have a lawyer background or something. So now okay, he's in AA. He was an alcoholic. He was at a bar. He's driving home from a bar. They can't prove that he wasn't drunk that night.
Right.
So now all these facts are stacking against him. So they're just going to assume, okay, well, he's an alcoholic. He was probably drinking that night, hit her, and now he's just feeling guilty. So he's going to come and try and make it seem like he was more innocent than he actually is. They're just going to hang him.
Right, exactly. And that's what his AA counselor says, who's played by Keith Sutherland, by the way. He's just like, oh, well, you're screwed if you say that. He's like, you're dead. He's like, they're going to put you 30 years easy. He's like, it's because we can't prove anything, like you just said. So he's like, you're
Yeah, you're assumed.
Yeah, you're just going to be assumed. And he's like, well, what am I supposed to do then? Like, I can't have someone just like, I know that he's probably not guilty. Like,
Right.
I have fairly good reason to believe that he isn't guilty and that I am. But like, I can't just destroy, my wife and soon to be born child's life just for like an accident, especially if I wasn't in fact drinking. You know what I mean? Or they can't prove that. And he's like, it just doesn't matter. You have the history. So that kind of revealed right away that the justice system was going to look at this with a very shrewd lens.
Mm.
It's not going to just take that, hey, it was an accident, it happened. This isn't like a regular thing of this person. And it was just going to be like, jailed,
Right. Well, yeah, justice is supposed to be blind, but is it?
Yeah.
So, with that being said, he goes with the option of, well, if I can just get this to where we rely on reasonable doubt to not be able to prove his guilt,
Mhm.
he gets let off. I don't have to confess. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But
Which makes sense because that is what the jury's supposed to do. You are not supposed to say this person should be punished or not. You're just supposed to say, is there a reasonable doubt? And you say, we found that there was reasonable doubt that they didn't do it. Or we found that there was no reasonable doubt. It's pretty confirmed that they did do it. And then the judge gives the actual punishment, the sentencing.
Yeah.
Or
Which
lack thereof.
is the interesting thing that goes on in the courtroom, because some people start to try and solve it. And it seems like they're on some decent leads. But at the same time, you have to keep questioning, like, this doesn't matter. You have to evaluate what you're given, the evidence presented in court, and then determine whether or not he's guilty. That's all you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to go any further than that. So then you start to get lost in the weeds because of all these subjective truths. And if you saw our previous Saturday episode, we talked about the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few, and how subjective truth is always going to be included in these decisions. Like, you can't just have an objective reality.
Yeah.
It's going to be subjective. And that was proven through this film, because you had multiple characters that kept going in and being like, well, I have this interest in the case or this interest in this fact, and that is going to determine whether I think this person's guilty or not. It doesn't matter if he actually killed his girlfriend. The fact is, this guy deserves it, and therefore I'm going to put him in jail, which is really just scary.
Like one guy, for example, he sees this like tattoo on the accused, and he's like, oh well, tattoo's part of a crime, and like I had like someone in my family who got that tattoo and then they were killed shortly after, and it's my tragic backstory. So I'm, never going to vote not guilty on this guy. Whether he did or didn't do it doesn't matter. He's not a good person. So he should just go to jail. And it's like, wait a minute, but you're not his executioner. Like, you don't have the right to just send someone to jail. And that's not what you're being asked to do. You're being asked to just determine whether or not this specific crime, whether or not there's doubt in your mind about if he could or could not have done it. And then this guy's just like, no, there's no, like, never.
Well, that also takes away the justice from that poor girl, because now it's no longer about her and her death.
It's
about this guy's personal opinion about this person he doesn't know because of his affiliation with something from his past. So now we're including things that no longer apply to him, because that's something that Nicholas Hoult brings up as well. He's like, well, look, I was an alcoholic and I should be dead. I wrapped my car around a tree when my blood alcohol content was so high that I should have been dead just from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrapped it around a tree. Didn't die from that either. I walked away without a scratch. And despite all of that, I have a woman at home that chose me despite all that stuff. He's like, I'm a changed man. I'm different than I was 4 years ago. So why shouldn't I assume that this man could have the same possibility?
Mm-hmm.
So it's unfair. So on one hand, like, and this was a point that I was thinking about during the movie, was I wondered if this would even be a possibility. This argument would have been brought up had Nicholas Hoult not been the one, well, assumed he was the one that killed this girl. Is it because of his assumption of this man's innocence, he was giving him more of a chance? Because there's not a lot of stuff you can go. I mean, you just have to go off what you're told. And if that's not super strong, do you really want to be the guy, with that over your conscience, that you're sending this person to jail for however long, or even giving him the death penalty, depending where you are?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you want that on your conscience based on this limited amount of knowledge and scope is like,
Yeah.
this is really difficult decision to make. And so many of these people seem so flippant.
Well,
He
yeah,
was not being flippant because he assumed he was guilty.
Yeah, because when he enters the room for the first time, everybody on the jury panel is just like, well, he's guilty. Send him to prison. Yep, down. All right, let's go home. They're just like, psh, it's over, done deal. And then he's like, well, I don't know. I think we should talk about it first. And everybody's just like, oh, there's always one. We got to deal with,
Right.
the do-gooder in the room.
Well, they're all prioritizing these other things that,
in some cases have nothing to do with him. It's just like, well, I want to get home, and I thought he
Right.
was guilty, so let's just.
I have two
do
kids
that.
at home or whatever. And from, when you're in their position, I can see what they're saying is, well, this is a lot of my time where I need to be with my family.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, zoom out and take away those subjective truths, it's like, yeah, you're dealing with a man's life. You literally have someone's life in your hands, despite whether you need to be home with your family or not. Like, this is
He can rot.
right. Yeah, exactly. That's what some of them were saying. It's like, man, should this be such a flippant thing for you guys? But I mean,
Glad it's easy for you, I guess.
but if I were to put myself in their shoes, I wonder, would I be thinking the same thing of like, oh, my kids are waiting at home for me. I gotta make sure they're fed. I gotta make sure they get to bed on time. Like X, Y, and Z, all this stuff stacks up, and it's like, well, this guy shouldn't have been in the situation anyway. He got himself here. So at what point do I just be like, well, I've got to give him something, and there's only so much information I have to work with, so I've got to work with the information I've got. And so it's tough. I get where they're coming from, but some of them were like super flippant. It was like, man, just because you dislike a tattoo that he has or an affiliation he had once, like that doesn't mean that this guy is guilty of murdering this poor woman.
Yeah, well, and they after that dude gives his whole sob story, I'm kind of like picking on him, but that's because like the very next moment is when Nicholas Holt's character shares his sob story, and he's just like, yours doesn't matter at all.
Right.
I'm like, wait a minute.
Mine's the important one.
Like, you're the only one who can have a tragic backstory in this room?
Well, because
how does that make sense?
Right
How's that
after
fair?
that was when he said, he goes up to him and is like, I know what you're thinking and I know what you're trying to do here, but you don't know what happened that night. I don't know what happened that night, but I do know he's a bad person, so we didn't put him in jail. It's like, doesn't your argument defeat its own self? Like, if you don't know what happened that night, you don't know that he killed her.
Which means you should have reasonable doubt at that point.
So now remove your subjective irritation with the man and his affiliations and be like, did he kill her or didn't he? That's all that matters. And if you come up with the answer, I don't know, that's called reasonable doubt, and therefore can't give him a guilty verdict.
Because the burden of proof is on the prosecution. They have to prove that that this person committed this crime. If they can't prove it, then it's like, well.
Right. What are you going to do at that point? You have to, I mean, it's not a perfect system, but you're never going to have a perfect system.
Right.
And the unfortunate thing is that these people were relying on that. And Nicholas Holt, the one who thought he was actually guilty, is the only one that's giving him a fair chance because he thinks he's guilty.
Well, because, he thinks his own self is guilty.
Right.
So he's fairly certain of this information, which also made it funny because him and even some other characters, I think, they're all just like, they say something to him where they're like, you don't know what happened that night. You don't know.
He's the only one
know.
that probably does.
And it's like, he actually does probably know. He's pretty sure, actually. They're just like, I know so much more about this than you do. They're like, I know human nature. I know all this like BS. And it was
I watch
just like,
a lot of crime drama, so
yeah.
I've got this nailed down.
And so like when you take that and you're like, okay, so these are the people that are casting a sentence here, and they're acting all high and mighty like they know something about what's going on, and they don't know anything. They're totally in the dark, and they're just being fed what's being given to them. And part of that comes down from, the system with like the police. Like one character brings up, they're like, it feels like what the police did was they just went out.
They had an assumption or a bias already.
They had an assumption or a bias. They figured, okay, he's probably the most likely suspect, so they grabbed him. And then they talked to a few people, and then they were like, well, is this the person you saw? And they're like, yeah, that's who I saw. That was probably him. And he's like, all right, well, it's good enough for me. So, yeah, I guess we have a case. That's him. And it's revealed that they didn't really try anybody else. They didn't try to really build a case.
Well, they didn't entertain any, because the guy is an abusive guy. He has a background.
Right.
Most of the time, it's the spouse or significant other. So you have all these factors that now have just been laid against this guy. And so they're just like, well, this is most likely.
Which is
So
reasonable. It's like
Occam's razor, just go with that.
right. But it's like that
But it
that tunnel
influenced
vision
right.
because now it's like you're like you said you don't entertain other possibilities that could be it. And so instead it's like everything has to have the motive and everything's got to have, it's got to fit the narrative that I'm building. And so then you present it to the jury and then the jury is looking at it going, well, I guess it seems reasonable enough to me. And it's essentially this rhythm, which is another thing that 12 Angry Men does. It's just like, if this person fails, then like it leaves a mistake for this person to trip up on it. If they trip up on it, then the next person trips on it. And it's like, you go through these tiers of people and then you get to the very end and it's like, look, is someone going to step up and be like, I think this is a little sus? Because if no one does, then this person goes to jail or gets the chair or like whatever it is. And you're like, it's kind of spooky. And I think it's like good that the justice system will go through like the layers, but it's also just like this routine acknowledgement about, the flaws in human nature and how we can just like, well, it makes sense to us that he would kill her based on his history. So that must be the only answer. And, then it's like you give into this idea, you tell others about the idea, and then they give into it. And, it could just be something as simple as like, an accident,
Well, so they brought up an interesting point where the police, given all this statistical data, which is that a significant other typically is the prime suspect, and that guy was there that night, and then has people that saw that he was being physically not abusive, maybe like physically aggressive. They're like, well, prime suspect number one. There are no other suspects because it's a dark night. You don't really know what happened after she left.
And nobody would have a vendetta against her, so
right.
Couldn't be that.
So they go up with these pictures to this eyewitness, this guy that lives across the road that couldn't see anything on that dark, rainy night. He just happened to see somebody get out of his car at some point, which doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, they just get out of their car and look around.
So
okay, meaning what?
Well, okay, so that must have been when he killed her, I guess. But that's the thing is he didn't see a face or anything. So these cops just come up and say, hey, did it look kind of like this guy? And he's like, yeah, I guess so. And so to them, it's like, well, there you go. But that's confirmation bias, is that you've built momentum that now it's just going to pick this guy up along the way rather than allowing an objective stance to be built. So now, once that's all investigated, because Nicholas Holt's the one that's like bringing up all these doubts, and so everybody starts to be like, well, maybe. Because at first he mentions it to the detective in the jury, and he's the one that goes out and looks for all the vehicles that might have had body damage involved in the last whatever couple months. And then he gets kicked off the jury, but that information goes to the prosecutor, and she starts asking questions. So now all these people are asking questions because Nicholas Holt brought up all these doubts, but Nicholas Holt's only bringing up the doubts because he thinks that he was the one that did it in the first place. So he's like leading them to him. But at the same time, he's just trying to lead him away from the guy he knows isn't guilty. So it's just, like I said, it's this weird conundrum where he's like, I don't want to be held accountable for this because it's a mistake, and they're going to burn me far more than I deserve to be burned, and it's going to leave my wife high and dry and my kid. But I don't want to leave this guy,
going to prison for something he probably didn't even do.
Right. And he's sympathetic because he's someone that's just as guilty in some ways for
having a
past
past
and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, well, I identified this guy. I mean, if I believe that he can't change, then neither can I.
Yeah.
And so it's a reflection on himself. And then he's watching how people are viewing someone like that and being like, well, if that's the case, then what are they going to do to me? Especially if they think that I'm sitting on this information and letting this guy rot. But at a certain point, you're forced into a corner. And so, you get to the last bit of the movie.
Yeah, I want to back up to something you said, because one of the jurors, J.K. Simmons plays one of the jurors, and he is a former cop, detective on homicide cases in particular. So he kind of spreads a lot of information as well, or some dissent in the jury case, and he's the one who's really like, well, maybe it could be like somebody else, and let me do some research and figure it out. But the the thing about it is like he brought such a level-headed, important perspective because Nicholas Holt is just kind of like, well, plausibly, possibly, maybe, I don't know. He's just trying to because he can't talk about his own experience in any way. So he's like, I got nothing here. I just feel like you guys should work harder, basically.
At that point, he just has to work to plant reasonable doubt in order to get a not guilty sentence. That's all he has to do. So
Right.
in him, the more data he gives, the more suspicious he looks.
Yeah, although he could just technically be silent and then just vote not guilty repeatedly because it has to be unanimous vote here.
Right.
So, like, he could just be like, well, I don't know. I just believed him.
That's fair, I guess.
he seemed honest when they
But
hung him up on
a hung jury wouldn't be a good result. I mean, it could come back around. Isn't that what they were talking about? How
Yeah,
that
they do
led to
mention
further consequences.
Yeah, because he thinks the hung jury result is decent, and then someone brings up, they're like, well, if it's a hung jury, it's just going to be another group of jurors. They're
Right.
going to go through the process again.
And they're
And
not
when
going to
they
have
do,
a you.
they're not going to have you. So then they're definitely going to get the guilty verdict
Sure.
in that scenario. Although I guess technically that remains to be seen. But the J.K. Simmons character being a cop, so like it's interesting because he like gives them a lot of valuable information that they wouldn't get otherwise. So it makes you wonder, like, wouldn't it be good to have someone with experience on a juror to like
Right.
help them think through some of this stuff? But at the same time, it's like maybe
Doesn't
that's
that create bias?
yeah, it creates bias. So then it's like maybe not. But the bias already existed because there was the guy who was just like, well, he's a criminal, so I'm just gonna put him in jail as best of my ability.
Right.
So it's like, all right,
Yeah,
well,
he
you're not
has a
helping
tattoo,
anything.
so therefore
Yeah,
to jail with him. Okay.
he has one tattoo, so F him. It's like, geez, cut him some slack.
Yeah, you don't know what his circumstances were or why or if he has changed or not. I mean, a tattoo, you don't just go get removed one day, but you can change a character at some point. So I mean,
Right.
who knows? So that was an interesting thing, but that leads to we might as well get into our negative on that point is that
Yeah.
there's two characters. I don't know if this is intentional or not. It's just something that stood out pretty blatantly. There's two characters that are real vocal and real two-dimensional.
And really not helping the juror case. Like these
Right.
people were like, it was like of all the like they every time they spoke, you were just like, dude, shut up. That's not fair. That's not honest. Like, hey, that has no integrity here. And everybody else was like willing to entertain ideas and was willing to like negotiate. These two characters, no, it was just like, I don't care.
Right. Well, the one was she just wanted to get back to her kids.
Yeah.
And she kept mentioning that. She's like, let's just call him guilty so I can go home. And then the other one's like, well, my family member got involved in a gang and
My dark past.
so he's got to go too. And they were both black characters. The only two black characters in there are the two that were totally unreasonable. I was like, look,
it was just weird. I was like,
yeah, a little bit of a weird coincidence.
because they were so vocal. And it was like, you are making these two characters so
wasn't-
much more
it
prominent
wasn't
than
just-
everybody else.
It wasn't just a line. Like, she didn't just say, let's do this so we can go home. And then he
The one
presented an
time.
argument where she was like, okay, you know what? Maybe we do that. Owe that to him as much as I want to go home.
Or even just like a scoff and then they let it go.
Yeah, they argue for like 5 minutes.
They're just like,
go on
no,
and
I want to
on.
go home. And like, oh, you have
Like,
to drag this
let
out.
it
This is your
go.
fault. And you're,
Yeah, it just it was constantly like, dude, shut up. Like, let other people have an opinion. There's 12 of you here. Why are you two the ones that like have the only opinions that matter? So it was an odd coincidence. Again, I'm not attributing anything to Clint Eastwood necessarily. It was just weird that happened.
yeah. Although I guess to be fair, the rest of the jurors' body was fairly diverse. Like, you had all kinds of different people there, and they were all just part of the mesh of the background of jurors.
Well, they were the two that just seemed totally unbendable because even some of the other
Right.
ones, they seemed to kind of sway a couple different ways. They would be like, well, maybe, I guess we do owe him at least a conversation or at least a day or something. Those two were just like, no, we don't owe him anything. He's guilty. Put him in jail. I was like, man, you know
For
what?
this crime or any crime you want to associate, doesn't matter.
Right.
Jail it is.
You might
Yep,
as well just
I'm going
tack
home.
him on. Sure.
Let's
Just
all go home.
let's say that he's guilty of other things too. It was very weird. It was like, man, this seemed
Jeez.
rather unforgiving for whatever. So, I already went over that. Yeah, no one's unbiased. The subjective truth is always going to push you in a direction. You're always going to have bias no matter how unbiased you think you are.
Yeah.
And that was prevalent in this whole film. That was the point. And it was interesting the fact that this guy who thought he was guilty was the only reason that this guy had a fair shot.
Yeah.
So, for what it's worth, it brought up that at least, which made it compelling.
I do feel like it's possible, like, let's suppose he didn't hit anything on his way home, driving home that night, because it's possible that he would have just felt sympathy for the guy because of his own past of dealing with alcoholism.
But at the same time, his wife's in a high-risk pregnancy, so he
so
might have
he
been
has the
pushed,
motivation to get home right away.
well,
yeah.
he might have been pushed into the same ideology as that one lady where it's like, I just got to get home. So at a certain point, like, we've got to make a decision with the information we have. So we might have to just say, oh, he's guilty, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Because reasonable doubt is such a vague thing. But if there's even a smidgen of doubt, like, do you call him guilty?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's also interesting, too, that so the jurors sit down and they're like, well, maybe we should start with, a vote just to see where everybody stands, which makes a lot of sense because, yeah, like what's the kind of energy in the room? What's everybody thinking of this case? Because
Should have been anonymous, yes.
But it should have been anonymous, yeah, because, like, you're sitting there and, like, a lot of times when you're experiencing something just by yourself, like, in your head, it's very different when someone else enters that space. It's especially true of writers. Like, you're writing something and it's like it's just you and what's existing there. And then when someone else reads it, it's kind of like odd. It's kind of weird. It's like now it takes on like a
Like inviting someone into your own room to
yeah.
evaluate your mess.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're sitting there in this trial and you're hearing the information being presented to you, but you don't actually know how anybody else is receiving this. You
Sure.
don't know what details they're paying attention to. You don't know what their history is to know like what actually resonates with them and what doesn't. So then you get to the back room, and then if everyone's just like, "Oh yeah, well I think this," and they're all against you, I mean, that must be a
You're
really
the odd man out,
intimidating.
yeah.
That's an intimidating feeling. So it's like, whoa, now, so I have to try to convince you guys? Like, that shouldn't be my role. I'm just supposed to here to, like, help us navigate the space and figure out, the conclusion that we all have come to. But it's like, if you guys have already gotten to that conclusion with no discussion, now all of the burden is on me to do that myself. And that's not really fair to the jurors. So I don't understand why. I understand. I just feel like everyone's going to want to vote initially anyways. I mean, what kind of jury doesn't want an initial vote? They just want to like, no, I don't want to know what anybody thinks. Like, well, isn't that what you're here to do? To figure out what everybody thinks? So yeah, why? And then why is it not anonymous? Like, because you can lead to this scenario where it's, all ganging up on one person.
To be fair, they do ask, like, should we just vote and see what the room is, and then they all just talk about it. And that's a very human thing to do. I think if I were in charge of this process, I'd be like, okay, everybody's got to just now discuss this in a completely objective manner without throwing in any opinions. Like, evaluate the facts, throw them on the table, whatever you have to do, but don't let anybody know what it is that you think, which way you're leaning. Now, I don't know how you would do that effectively, or if everyone's capable of doing that effectively, but that's just in order to make sure that everybody's on the same page. You get the different perspectives of what people picked up. And then I would vote anonymously where, okay, write this on a piece of paper, pass it down, someone shuffles it, hands it to the next person. They evaluate what it looks like in the room, half and half, whatever the case may be, and then reevaluate and maybe start adding some bias in there where it's like, okay, now what is your opinion? Which way are you leaning? Because then you can kind of evaluate, well, if there's only one person in here that thinks he's not guilty, maybe we don't have to put that person under a microscope. Because now you're putting the pressure on that person where it's like, this one might have some valuable insight. But if everyone's upset, they're going to pressure that person, and that person might bend under that pressure. And now that person gets guilty, even though that one person that thought he's not guilty may have something valuable to add to the conversation.
Such as, hey, guys, it was actually me who killed her.
Yeah, which is what this movie's about. But that's not how he solves it.
Yeah.
So without giving, I guess, too many spoilers, the ending was interesting. It remains fairly anonymous, but I thought the scene right before it, I think, was...
The conversation
So
thing?
there's a conversation between the juror number 2 and the prosecutor, and they're sitting in front of Lady Justice. They have an interesting dialogue, and then he stands up and leaves, and Lady Justice is standing there holding the scales, and the wind is blowing them, so it's
So they're
shifting.
moving.
So
Yeah.
you're not sure how balanced they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a very interesting way to end that because of how ambiguous justice was in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, well, what is justice here? Someone did die, absolutely.
Right.
But whose negligence led to that? Was it the guy who fought with her? Was it her for rashly running away in the rain and the dark? Was it him for looking at his phone while he's driving home? Or
Mm-hmm.
even for him going to the bar when he shouldn't have been there?
Mm-hmm.
All these factors kind of stack up, and you're not really sure who necessarily is at fault because he does get out and look to see what happened,
Yeah.
and you can't see. And he can't climb down on the bridge without endangering his own life, so he thinks, well, the most likely thing, again, Occam's razor, is that it was probably just a deer since it happens so often out here. It's
Right.
probably just something that I don't need to worry about, like, oh, this just kind of happens all the time, so I'll just move on.
Yeah. And like you said, that the responsibility sort of is like it starts to stack up because there's so many other people involved. Like she's walking home at night in high heels in the pouring down rain, drunk. It's like, I mean, she wasn't that drunk, I don't think, but also like that seems real dangerous.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, even without cars on the road, yeah.
Yeah, with or without cars. Like, I don't know. Like, you could slip. Like, you could get lost. I mean, if you take a wrong turn, if you're not paying close enough attention to the road,
Sure.
like, I mean, it's so dark, you could really lose, your sense of direction. I get that, like, her ride was her boyfriend and they, like, are breaking up. But, like, you could call someone before you just storm out. And it's like,
Sure.
maybe you're really upset, but just go to the bathroom, try to collect your cool, call somebody to pick you up, or get a gal pal. There were some other women out in the bar. Like, maybe talk to one of them. Like, maybe one's ending her shift soon and maybe she can give you a ride or something. Maybe ask Nicholas Holt. That guy looks like he's having a miserable night. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
You guys can cry together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all like red in the face.
Can you give me a ride? I suppose. Yeah, it added some very interesting perspective to, how black and white the system is not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because with the boyfriend, it's like, you can let her walk home at night. You can't pull yourself together to apologize and take her home.
Sure.
Like, at the
But at
very
the same
least.
time, he might just push her away and it might be fruitless anyway. He goes out there and asks, and she's like, get away from me, and just keeps walking. So at that
But
point,
at least he could ask, and instead he
Sure.
goes out and yells at her and makes the situation worse. He inflames it. So it's like, yeah. So that whole thing is interesting. One thing someone says too is justice always true or something like that.
or does truth always lead to justice or something like justice isn't always based in truth or something like that. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting line.
I firmly disagree with that, though. I think the truth is totally separate from justice. I think they very often don't have anything to do with each other.
I think if you're looking at it in the context of how complicated some of this can be, yes. But also it's difficult, especially in a situation like this one, it's difficult for any one person to have all of, the information to determine what the truth is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because like I just said, I mean, there's all these factors that led to this event. And at some point, it's like, well, what does fault look like? What does responsibility look like in this?
Yeah.
Because you can have Nicholas Holt come up and just take responsibility, but then
For what purpose? Because, like, he didn't do a mistake that was any differently than what any of us have done on
sure.
a regular Tuesday.
I know. Well, I run into people on purpose all the time, but that is neither here nor there. Yeah, because then you have to ask, like, well, who is at actual fault? Because you have to have multiple perspectives in order to determine the actual truth of the matter. There is truth to the fact that yes, he was negligent in some of his actions. He did hit something, but it wasn't it wasn't his intent. And it wasn't out of murderous malice, and it wasn't out of an extreme negligence. It wasn't like driving drunk or something.
Yeah, he wasn't like,
Right.
He was just kind of broken up.
It was a rainy, dark night. She was walking on a narrow bridge. Like, it was just a series of unfortunate events that led to an unfortunate outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point where does justice lie there? is it just to put him away despite the fact that he has these responsibilities? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's not just that she died, but at the same time, like, at what point do you take extreme measures against the person who caused that? It caused is the bad word to use here, but
Yeah. Well, and you can't even have, like the fact that he cannot bring it up this to the courthouse because he knows they will just hang him because of his past
right.
of
And
struggles with
potentially
alcohol.
kill his wife and their unborn child. Like,
Yeah, like, it's like the system itself should be able to shift through that in an unbiased way and say,
mhm,
like, well, I'm just looking at the isolated event. Okay, it was an accident, but it was an accident. It's not really your fault that much. I mean, we can't
sure.
really hold you to that very much. So that's about it. Case closed. But instead, they're going to be like, "Oh, well, you're an alcoholic, so you go to prison." It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Again, it's like he would go to prison for a fault that, in some sense, wasn't even what he actually did,
Right,
which is
exactly.
what they were pinning on the other
So
guy.
now how just is that?
Right?
And
Yeah.
that's it again, like, and you have to figure out what cause means. Where he was the one in the car, but the boyfriend was the one that didn't give her a ride home.
Right.
She was the one that walked on that road. So, like,
Yeah.
at what point do you determine causation to begin? Is
Mm-hmm.
it just the incident there that led to her falling from the bridge? Or is it the fact that she was on the bridge? Or is it the fact that she had a fight
Someone
with her
needs to
boyfriend?
take the fall.
Exactly. It's like, well, yeah, I guess justice is blind, but at what point is like what does justice look like there?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we've beaten that point. I
Yeah.
think we clarified. But it was a very interesting film to encapsulate that problem and make you ask all these questions.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about that concept, though? I'm curious to your thoughts about, like, is truth always just, or however they worded it? I should have double checked that. But, like, because I just feel like there's so many events in real life that have nothing to do with justice.
You'd have to define justice and you'd have to define like
Okay, well, I'll give you an example. So when I came over here today, I sent you a text. I asked you if you wanted some lunch, and you said lunch would be great. And I said, "What would you like?" And you said wings. And then I said, "Well, I will look in the garbage can around the back and see if there's anything for you, and I'm going to get some food myself."
oh
Which is what I did. And so I brought you a burger, or a half-eaten one, and
yeah.
I had removed, there was something nasty. I don't think it matters.
All right, it's
But
probably nutritious.
so I got you that instead. Now, was that justice? It was true.
I don't even know if to justify that with an answer. What a hypothetical, my gosh. Yeah, I don't know. I think yes, they can be separate, but I think again, you have to figure out what justice means, you know?
Mm,
And
old Plato's problem.
yeah, let's use this Socratic method to figure it out. I I do believe in the philosophy that the truth sets you free, but I think that's in a personal sense, right? Because
Yeah.
him admitting to his mistake,
We'll just put him in jail.
well, I'm saying in a personal sense, like he is now
He
he's
would never.
relieving
Yeah.
himself of guilt by admitting to it,
Right.
but it depends on to whom he's admitting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Admitting it to his attorney to gain some legal counsel is one thing, but going and admitting it to subject himself to something that may or may not be construed as justice is a difficult thing to determine.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, everyone's definition of justice is going to be different based on what standards you hold it to.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Hmm.
That's tough.
It's a reminder that there is, you know, as much as people say they want justice, or they want truth, or they want people to be honest, if you create conditions that extremely discourage them from being honest, then they're not going to be honest. They
Sure.
have no reason to now. And then you get mad when they're not. And it's like, well, you created the very scenario for this to happen. Like, if the justice system does not want, or if the justice system wants a character like Nicholas Holt to just be honest, then he should get off scot-free, as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
Because
if you evaluate all the information that way, then
yeah,
yeah, I mean,
right.
that would be justice, would it not?
Right, because it's an accident, and, like, you shouldn't be held. So, I mean, if it's there is a degree here. If it's like a profound accident, like, oh, I was just super wasted, and I was driving and I thought in my head it'd be fun to play a game to just ram into all the
Sure.
pine cones or the what are those
Traffic
traffic
cones?
cones, yeah, and you mistook a traffic cone for a human being. But then it's like, yeah, I would say like, well, you're responsible here to some degree because you shouldn't have been that drunk. You shouldn't have been playing this stupid game.
Sure.
Like you were being negligent, right? But like in the other scenario, it's like, well, he wasn't being negligent, not really, like not more than any
Well,
other average person.
right.
So
Again,
it's
you'd
like
have to figure
he's
out who's
human.
being more negligent at that point.
Yeah.
Is it him for driving at night, or is her walking on a narrow bridge, putting herself in danger like that?
Yeah, if this was Europe, they would be like, "Oh, well, it's her fault.
Right.
What an idiot." The case would stop there
Legit.
because they'd be like, "Well, the person driving has the right of way, so screw the person."
Sure. Yeah, and again, I mean, what good would it do to throw him in jail? Because I mean, he's just gonna retain the knowledge that, like, yeah, well, I didn't want to kill this person. I don't even know this person. So, like, what is sitting in jail for years gonna do?
You think about what you did,
Yeah, I did. I do all the time.
about how you became a better person, and about how
Right.
you were doing good. You think about that.
This is also not an endorsement not to be honest. Like, honesty is a virtue, but you're right. You have to determine, and that's what this movie was doing, was adding in these other factors. It's like, okay, what is the greater evil? I guess we can say. Is it to turn yourself in and abandon your wife and child, who has a high risk pregnancy and has already lost a couple of kids through this? Or is it to subject yourself to the justice system, for them to do with you as they please based on an
Right.
accident? I mean,
And their limited knowledge and your limited knowledge of the scenario.
Right.
Because you don't even know for certainty. You didn't see,
right.
you weren't able to confirm what you hit. You didn't see anything of it.
Yeah,
you know
for all
you
you
hit
know,
something.
for all you know, at the end of the movie is that he might have hit a deer for all he knew, and somebody else hit her. They don't know. It seems like it's
Yeah.
most likely that he did, but you don't know that for certain. And so you're just kind of left with this, like, well, what do you do in this situation?
Yeah.
You're a finite individual, so
Yeah. I suppose so I got one more conundrum for you with his wife, because he has an interesting problem with her too, because he doesn't really share much about the case with her. And obviously he's not sharing it with her because she's about to pop. And so he's like, I don't want to put all this stress on her. She's trying to give a baby. Also, I'm not even supposed to share the details of the court case. But then that burdens him. So he has this like impossible situation where it's like if he tells her, he puts her in a more difficult, stressful situation. But at the same time, he should be honest with her and be able to do that.
Yep.
So it was kind of like that was a tricky problem too. It's like they made his life as horrible and like, full of just impossibilities, which made it, really compelling. But I was really like I felt bad for the two of them because I was like, he can't tell her, but he should tell her, but he probably shouldn't. So
if I were in the situation, I think I'd wait. It'd be tough, but I think I'd wait till after the pregnancy. Because in my opinion, if you go up and say, hey, this could have put this pregnancy at risk and we're already worried at the wazoo for it,
yeah,
I'll hold this burden until after we know that the baby's safe. And then I'll be like, okay, now I will let you know.
sure,
I know this is going to suck. You're going to feel like I held it from you. But at the same time, like, if I'm prioritizing the life of my child,
yeah,
then I feel like that should be grounds for, like, some grace.
yeah, I would think so.
But that's, I mean, again, that's eliminating the subjective truth of that relationship and what it's built on, because he's already got
Yeah.
some trust issues and things. But at the same time, it's like, well, what is the greater good there? In my opinion, it's the life of that child. It's like, well, I don't really care what it takes. I'm going to make sure that that life is protected first, and then I'll go into the hard conversation later.
Yeah, it depends on what the two of them have agreed upon. I second that. It's because it's their relationship, so it's a private affair. I also think there's something to be said about like how do I put this? it's like saying, well, if I tell you this, it might
Right.
it might just cause something to happen like right this moment, and then we wouldn't be able to deal with either problem. So maybe it's just like totally impractical.
Sure.
Because she's like right there. She is ready.
She's like days away, if anything. Yeah.
And she's already had a troubled past with this before, so it's like, okay, all hands on deck. Let's not rock the boat.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
But he can't say anything about it, otherwise that's going to rock the boat. The
Yeah,
fact that
at the
he's
very
like,
nature.
I have this information that might rock the boat, so I'm not going to say anything. She's just going to sit there and wonder what that information is.
Yeah, it's just going to drive her nuts. So don't do that.
So you just don't say anything.
So I don't know. I also here's the other thing I was going to say. I also think like people, I don't think it's good to like pressure information out of people sometimes. Like I don't think it would be good of her to like force and extract the information out of him, and kind of like if he doesn't feel like comfortable or safe to tell me right now, it's a problem if it persists for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's just like temporarily, it's not hard. Like she seemed pretty smart. She could figure out like, okay, he's probably just worried about me and the baby.
Yeah.
The case is getting to him and he's not supposed to share too many details of that. I get it. Like, let me just give him some time. I do want to revisit this. Like if I was her, that's what I would say. I'd be like, okay, well, you're clearly not fine. I want to revisit this, but when you feel more comfortable and ready to do that.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know.
She kind of gave him that option. She's pushy, but who wouldn't be in that situation if she's feeling like she's at risk too? So
yeah, good movie,
great movie,
and interesting ending too.
Very.
The last shot, it's kind of like, oh man.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
Good.
Go watch it. It was a good movie.
Yeah. Thank you for watching.